Thank you for coming. Our guest today, Gary Oberg, and I was fortunate enough this last summer at the Chaplain's Conference to hear Gus speak. Downside was, all we did was get to hear him speak. It seemed a large crowd. We could not really converse with him and learn more about what he had to say. And we decided way back from Texas, we would have this man in our state as soon as possible. And so through many hard efforts with the Ridgecrest Baptist Church and Gary Oberg mainly, we have Gus and Jerry with us this weekend. And I called Gus and asked him about his interest in maybe just talking to some law enforcement professionals to discuss more in detail about the Kennedy assassination. He was delightfully receptive to that. And as I said earlier, I and Jerry spent the afternoon at Wildwood watching the Jeff movie. I've seen it 3 times, Mark. I took notice the second time, and we went into a crowded theater today, David. There was probably 40 people in the day, and the time before it's 3 of us. And we sat in the front. I thought they were going to throw us out for being disorderly. Gus was cutting up, laughing. They couldn't believe this. It's like Disney World, he said. But I think everybody watched the 3 of us more than the movie. But Gus, we're glad to have you. Gus has been known for many things in Texas. The main one in his career, the high point, as he said, was the investigation he handled there with the Kennedy and Oswald situation. And he has handled in his career with Dallas PD some 30 years, over 1,000 homicide cases, and is now actively working with the constable's office in that county. Gus, you come and speak to us. Glad to have you.
Sure. Well, I'm glad to be here. I want to thank Gary Oberg and Rick Harris for inviting me to be down here. I met them at the International Police Chaplains Conference in Arlington, a suburb of Dallas, last year. And you're really fortunate here to have 2 men of this caliber who are good Christian men in your police department. I joined the Dallas Police Department in 1954, and at that time, the officers didn't hire the same type of people they do now, but most of those guys were really tough guys. They didn't have, most of them didn't have a very religious background. But I think you're fortunate when we have men who can serve as chaplains in our police work. I've been an active law enforcement officer for 37 years. I've been a Christian since I was 15 years old. I grew up in a Christian environment, and my mother and father still live. They were good Christians. And so they taught me to love the Lord at a young age, and I still do, and I taught my children the same way. I credit any success I've had as a police officer in this past 37 years with a good, solid Christian upbringing. I think today that we're having problems in these schools. We do need to, I do think we need to get the Lord back in the schools. In our Dallas schools, we can't even have the 10 Commandments posted on the walls. And I, for one, believe that we can educate the children, but we do need to teach them morals at the same time. Brother Ken Ashlock is our chaplain there in Garland. He's the police chaplain. He pastors New Liberty Baptist Church. He told me an interesting story. He said that this young minister was down in East Texas in the backwoods there. He just came in to pastor his first church there, and he wanted to find the toughest group there, the toughest guys there, and see if he could just win them over. If he could, he would feel like he was really successful. So they told him about his father and 3 sons that were living in the backwoods there and had a little moonshine still back there. And they's tough, they were really bad guys. So he went out to witness to them, and they promptly beat him up and threw him out of their camp. Didn't know how he found that little still. And so he waited a few days and he went back, and they did it again. They beat him up, threw him out of the camp. Said, "You come back, we're just going to beat all the skin off your back, you know." And so he left with the full intention of not going back. A few days later, one of the sons got bit by a rattlesnake out of his armpit. And it was hot weather, and he felt like he was dying. They got him back to the cabin, and they didn't know what to do because now they believe he's dying. So father and the other 2 sons called the minister, and he comes down there. And they said, "We don't know what else to do, but we think he's dying here. Can you help us at all?" The young minister said, "Now this is my chance." So he had everybody hold hands, and he got beside the bed, and he started to pray for this guy with the snake bit. And he said, Lord, I just thank you for what's happened here today. He said, well, I really just thank you for this snake that bit this guy, because he just did more for him than I could do in all my witnessing. He said, well, Lord, just send me 3 more rattlesnakes, just like that. He was going to win over those other 3. When I entered the police department in Dallas, Dallas was a city, probably about like the city here, and I joined the department in May of 1954, worked in radio patrol for 4 years, was promoted to detective, worked a couple of years as a burglary and theft detective, and then went into homicide. I went into homicide in 1959, near the end of 1959. So I was assigned to a homicide investigative team. Captain Fritz was our supervisor. We had 24 detectives, and we had 2 lieutenants and a captain. And that was what the homicide unit consisted of in Dallas in 1960. We worked split shift. Half of us worked evenings and the other half worked days. So that in 1963, in November, I was assigned to the evening detail due to come on duty at 3 p.m. Now, I'd like to bring you up to date just a minute. Things were going on in Dallas in 1962 and 1963. The political climate in Dallas had been sort of supercharged by a series of events that had occurred and was receiving a lot of publicity. The John Birch Society was very active at the time in '62. There were some billboards posted around town that proclaimed impeach Earl Warren. Lyndon Johnson and Adlai Stevenson came to town to make a speech, and some protesters struck Stevenson on the head with a sign. Got a lot of publicity, I mean a tremendous amount of publicity. In addition, there was a general of the Army named General Edwin Walker, who retired from the military and came back to his home in Dallas, and he refused to accept his pension. He would send the check back, and he was getting a lot of publicity, he was getting a lot of press. In fact, I was on duty one night when General Walker was in his quarters at his home on Turtle Creek in Dallas, and as he sat at his desk, he dropped a pen, he stooped to pick it up, and as he did, a shot rang out, came through the window and struck the wall where his head would have been if he hadn't moved. A narrow miss, but I responded to the call. My partner and I did respond to that call. And Walker said, well, I've got a lot of enemies. I've been getting a lot of hate mail and so forth, and somebody just wanted to kill me, I guess. And he took it pretty good. We didn't know who tried to kill him. We did retrieve the slug from the wall there that where this guy tried to kill him. And an investigation was launched, and we didn't get very far with it, really, to see who had done it. So all this had drawn a tremendous amount of publicity in Dallas. Now, about the time that the president was due to come to the area, the Democratic Party was in somewhat of a split. There was 2 factions there, and the worry was that they'd like to mend this party back together and get them all back together. And President Kennedy had originally planned to come to Fort Worth, make a speech in Fort Worth, then travel to Houston where he would make another speech. And the party prevailed on him to stop in Dallas and to participate in a little motorcade and make a speech in Dallas. And the belief was that it would help bring people together and probably might even help to mend this rift in the Democratic Party. So when it was decided that he would come to Dallas, a parade route was listed in the newspapers, a possible route for the parade. It would come out of Love Field. At that time was our #1 airport. It would come out of Love Field, and it would travel west on Mockingbird, and it would take a route to, the streets may not mean anything to you, but wind up at the convention site where he was to speak. But then later, a little later, it was decided he would come downtown and ride in a motorcade right downtown. He would have a lot more visibility, and so that route was placed in the newspaper. And it was decided that would be the route. He would come down Main Street, make a right turn at Houston Street, go 1 block to Elm Street, and take a left turn. And that took him under a triple underpass and onto a freeway out to the convention side. And so along the parade route, people were lined up, and it got a lot of publicity, a lot. So there was no special provisions made by the homicide unit to participate in the security for the president. That was handled mainly by Secret Service, and the other help they needed was furnished by other sections of the Dallas Police Department, but homicide wasn't involved in the preparation. On that day, I was downtown for an early lunch, preparing to get ready to go to work at 3 p.m. Came out of the restaurant and I heard on the car radio that the president had been shot. I heard sirens all downtown, and I realized I should report to duty as soon as possible. I had my wife with me, and I took her by the house and went straight on to the office. And when I arrived at the office, there was a large number of people who had been brought in from the book depository side. These were prospective witnesses who had seen or heard something that made them a witness. And in working the homicides, we handled it like we would any other homicide. At that time, on homicide cases, we brought all the witnesses to the station where we took notarized affidavits or statements from those people. So I began to interview witnesses who was at the site when the shooting occurred. One man that I started talking to said that he was standing in the front part of the motorcade as it rounded the turn off of Houston on to the Elm Street there. And he heard a shot, and he looked up in the book depository window, and he saw a man in that window with a rifle. He said, I got a good look at his face from where I was, and I saw those two other shots as they were fired. He said that something hit me in the leg right here, and he showed me a spot. That man had been struck in the leg by a fragment of skull that came from the president. You see, the shot that really, contrary to whatever you see in the movie or whatever you hear or read, the president was shot from the right back here. And that bullet exited out the front with tremendous velocity. With such velocity that brain tissue and blood and skull fragments was spewed out forward, and a skull fragment struck this man in the leg. It had to be removed from the skin there of his leg before you retrieved that fragment. I tell you that just to show you where he was when that last shot came out. Now he told me that if I see that guy again, I believe I could recognize him. That was his words. And I received a call from a police dispatcher along about that time. He told me that the police officer Tippit, J.D. Tippit, had been shot and killed in Oak Cliff section of Dallas. That's kind of southwest part of Dallas. I knew Tippit well, and it was a shock, and I did not immediately associate the murder of Tippit with anything that was working on here with the assassination. I continued to interview this witness and write down what he told me. In a little while, there was a commotion at the front part of the office. This was a large office. Had a front door, came off the hall there. Captain Fritz had an office right here with glassed around, and we called it the squad room. It's where all the detectives and homicide came in. We did our paperwork and met there every day. Adjoining that, we had two small interrogation rooms. District Attorney liked for us to call them witnesses. we got people in witnesses, but it was an interrogation room. I saw this commotion at the front of the office, and I went to the front of the office to see what was going on, and they had a man up there with his hands handcuffed behind his back, and he was talking loudly, and he was pretty boisterous talking. He was cussing. He was very belligerent. And the officers explained to me that they had the man there that had killed Officer Tippit. And they told me the details of the arrest. And I took this man into a small interrogation room. Officer Stovall and I did, another detective. And began to question him. Now, the first thing I asked him is who he was. And he refused to give me a name. He gave me a belligerent answer. He cussed and he talked a little bit vulgar at me. I didn't go where he said to go, but anyhow, I searched him. I took the handcuffs off, had him behind his back, and he seemed to be kind of in pain with them, and so I took them off, and I set this on the front loosely so that he wouldn't have those behind him. And I searched him, and in his pocket I found two identification cards. One card had the name Alex Hydell, and the other card had the name Lee Oswald. I said, well, which one of these are you? And he said something to the effect that you're the cop, you figure it out. He said a little more, I won't go into all that, but he was very belligerent about it, and he would not give me an answer. I began to question him, and I asked him questions, these questions. I asked him where he lived, where he worked. I asked him if he had any family in the area, or here in Dallas. I asked him if he had ever been in the military service. I asked him questions designed to let me establish a rapport with him in order to be able to interrogate him. Now, to all these questions, he lied. He did not tell me any truthful answer at all. He told me he wasn't married, and he didn't have any family in the area. He told me that he was a printer and worked at a local printing company. He told me he'd never been in the military service, had no military background. And so I really wasn't getting very far with him. He was answering questions, but he was lying about everything. And I could sense it. I could tell that he was lying. I could tell he was untruthful. He just wasn't being truthful at all. After a little while, there was a knock on the interrogation room door, and I went to the door to see who it was, and it was my supervisor, Captain Fritz. He said, I've just come from the book depository side. We have pretty well wrapped it up down there. And he said, I want you to get some officers to go with you and find an employee who's missing. One of the employees that we've accounted for all of them but one, and there's one missing. And I said, okay, I would, Captain, but I have the man in here who killed Officer Tippit, and I've been working on that now. And Captain Fritz said, I'll have someone else work that out, but I want you to go find this missing employee. He was suspect in the shooting of the president. Well, he don't argue with Captain Fritz anyway, but so I said, all right, I will. What's his name? And Captain Fritz kind of fished around in his pocket. He came out with his kind of an old notepad that he always carried. He flipped through there and he said, his name is Lee Oswald. And a brilliant piece of deduction. I said, I got it right here. This is him. I'm pretty sure it is because it had ID on it. It said Lee Oswald. The captain instructed me to go ahead and locate any of his family. Captain Fritz had been told they thought Oswald was a married man. Captain Fritz wanted me to locate the family and bring them in for questioning. So he took over the suspect, and I left with some other officers, and we located the Oswald's family. They were living with a woman named Ruth Payne. She lived in Irving, a suburb of Dallas, on 5th Street. So we drove in 2 cars to the 5th Street address, parked on a side street, walked up the front. Now, at this point, we had listened to the radio on the way out there. There had been no mention made of the arrest of Oswald. He hadn't been properly identified, and no name had been released at that point. As I approached that front door of the house, I could see that the front door was open, the screen door was closed, and there was light flickering inside. I could tell the television was on. And without having to knock, as I approached the door, a woman's voice inside said, "Come on in, I've been expecting you." So I stepped into the room without identifying myself any further. I was dressed about like I am now. Might have had the same suit on. I've been wearing a long time. I stepped into the room and I said, "Why are you expecting us?" And she said, "Oh, I could tell you were police officers, and I knew that you'd be out here. Someone would be out to talk to us as soon as I saw that the president was shot from the book depository side." I said, "Well, you must be Ms. Oswald. Are you Ms. Oswald?" And she said, No, I'm Ruth Payne. Marina Oswald is here, but you can't talk to her." I said, "Well, why not?" She said, "Well, she doesn't speak any English." And I said, "Well, what does she speak?" She said, "Oh, she's a Russian citizen. She just speaks Russian." I speak pretty good Texan, but I don't speak any Russian. So I said, "Well, how do you communicate with her?" And she said, "I speak a little Russian language. I'm taking some Russian language courses." I said, "Would you interpret for us?" And she said, "Yes." And we called Marina in, and I asked her several questions. She seemed cooperative. She seemed a little nervous, but I believe she was truthful. As I talked with her, she didn't seem to be evasive. I asked her one question. I asked her if her husband owned a rifle, and she said, "Yes, he does." This is being interpreted by Ruth Payne. I said, "Do you know where that rifle is now?" Now, I knew at that point in time that a rifle had been recovered on the 6th floor of the book depository. And she said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Well, can you show it to me?" She said, yeah, I can. Follow me. Now, this is all interpreted by Ruth Payne. And she led me into the kitchen part of the house and opened the door that goes out into the garage. And she pointed out there. The garage was kind of darkened in there, but there was a rolled up blanket out there. And she said, that's his rifle. And as I looked, I could see the imprint of a rifle in that blanket. And I stepped out in the garage and I picked it up. When I did, it was empty. There was nothing in it. Kind of just fell limp over my arm. And I heard Marina gasp. It was an audible gasp. And I looked around and she was sort of pale and her eyes was wide. And I think at that point she sensed that this thing was much, much worse than maybe she'd even hoped it would be. I don't know. I don't think that she knew the rifle was gone. I have no idea at all that she knew it was gone. I don't believe she would have pointed out that way. Nevertheless, we searched the garage. We found a large number of items in that garage that belonged to Oswald. Ruth Payne said, I'll let him keep some of his things here. I won't let him stay here. He can come out on weekends and see the family, but he can't stay here because he won't contribute to their support. And Ruth Payne said, he's a real nut. I just don't like him being around here anyway. So you can look through those things there if you want to, and we did. Some of the things I found that might interest you, one thing, I found a photograph and the negative. And this photograph showed Oswald standing in front of a frame house. He had a rifle in his hand, a newspaper in his hand, pistol on his hip. And we were able to take that negative and enlarge that thing and tell that that's the same rifle we had found on the 6th floor of the book depository site. And the pistol also was the same pistol he had when he arrested for killing Officer Tippit. The newspaper was a copy of the Communist Daily Worker. And Marina told us that she took the picture. She was the photographer. She snapped the picture for me. I said, why did he dress up in that fashion? And she said, he liked it. This is interpreted. But she said he liked to brag that he was a communist soldier. And that's what she told us. So we found a lot of items there. We found some pamphlets, Fair Play for Cuba Committee pamphlets. We found a lot of writings where he had written some outlandish political writings and things. And we brought all these people, Ruth Payne, Marina Oswald, her 2 children, to the City Hall in Dallas for statements. And just as was leaving the Payne residence, the lady came up to me and she said, you might want to talk to my brother, Wesley Frazier. He brought Oswald out here last night. He works at the book depository. And I said, okay, well, I'm sure if somebody has, but if they haven't, I will. So we go back to the office and turn these people we have over to Captain Prince and other officers. He told me to go back and locate Wesley. He had been interviewed briefly, but to bring him in for further interview. And I did. And here's what he told me. He said he worked at the book depository, had been working there for a little while when Oswald came to work there. He said he didn't like Oswald. Oswald was a loner type person. He was unfriendly. And most of the people that worked around there did not like him or have anything to do with him. He said that Oswald had rented a little one-room apartment on Beckley Street, which is about a mile from the book depository site. And he said he lived there alone in this little one-room apartment. But every Friday evening, he comes to me and he wants to ride out to Irving to see his family at the Payne residence. He said, so I let him ride out there, and then on Monday morning, I go back there and pick him up and take him back to work. And he said, the odd thing is that yesterday being Thursday, the day before the assassination, he said yesterday afternoon, he came to me and he said, can I go to Irving with you this afternoon? And he said, I said, well, you can, but why today? You always just go on Friday when you go. He said, oh, there's something out there I have to pick up. He said, so I drove him to the Payne residence. I let him out of the car and said, I'll pick you up here in the morning. He said that this morning, the next morning, he said, this morning, as I was preparing to leave the house to go pick Lee up, I saw him approaching the house. And he had a large item like this wrapped in brown wrapping paper. And as he got to the house there, he didn't wait for me to come down there and pick him up. As he got to the house, I said, Lee, what you have in that paper there? And he said, oh, it's curtain rods from my apartment. Now, Wesley said this. He said, I did not believe for a second that it was curtain rods. It didn't look like curtain rods, but I certainly wasn't going to argue with him because he was a real nut. He said, so we got in the car, we drove to the book depository site, and when we got out of the car, Oswald took that package out with him. And I said, Lee, why don't you just lock that up under the trunk of my car, and when we get off this evening, you can get it. He said, no, I need it up here. Now, immediately after the assassination, we found that brown wrapping paper on the 6th floor near the rifle that we found. The brown wrapping paper had some gun oil stains inside it. The rifle we found had Oswald's fingerprint on it. Secondly, we traced the ownership of that rifle, and it was purchased out of a mail order house out of Chicago by a person using the name Alex Heidel, Oswald's alias name. And we found 3 empty cartridges of the gun there on the 6th floor. Oswald had gone out to the house in Irving on Thursday night with the intent to pick up that rifle, which he did do. He didn't wait for Wesley to come back and pick him up there Friday morning, I'm sure, because he didn't care for that. He didn't want Marina and Ruth Payne to see him pick his rifle up. Now, Ruth Payne said that she was still in bed when Oswald left that morning, and Marina said she got up to take care of the children, and she didn't see him actually leave the house. So what he did is he went out in the garage, he got that rifle, that blanket, and he took it to work with him. Now after we fingerprinted the rifle, Carl Day, a lieutenant in the crime scene search section of the Dallas Police Department, fingerprinted the rifle on the 6th floor up there. He did obtain a print, which did match Oswald's print. We later sent that rifle under separate cover, along with that blanket, to the FBI laboratory for testing. And the fibers that came out of that blanket was found in the butt of that rifle. Now, I just tell you that to prove that at some point in time, that rifle on the 6th floor of the book depository had been wrapped in that blanket. I cut out to Irving, out of that garage. And in continuing the investigation, we found witnesses who said that day, who said, we saw the man in the 6th floor, we believe we can identify him. A lineup was conducted in police headquarters on the stage, in a regular lineup stage. You've seen it on TV, I know, where the numbers are. And Oswald was positively identified by 2 that I know of as the man in the 6th floor window who they saw with the rifle. Other information, I interviewed a witness who said that shortly after the assassination, well, I talked to Officer Baker, who was a motorcycle officer first. Officer Baker said, when I heard the shots, I looked up and saw that rifle in the 6th floor window. He said that I threw my motorcycle down and I ran into the building. He said, as I entered the building, I met the building manager. The guy identified himself as the building manager. He said, we started up those stairs, and he said, we got up to about the 3rd floor, somewhere about midway. He wasn't exactly sure. We met a man coming down the stairs, he said. He said, I told that man, hold up, I want to talk to you. And the building manager said, oh, he's okay, he works here. So we went on those stairs. Well, that was Lee Oswald he talked to. Witness that says Oswald came out of the book depository site. They saw him looking right and left, acting very suspiciously. He got on a city bus that was sitting there blocked up in traffic and couldn't go anywhere. He sat there for several minutes. Finally, he got up and said something to the driver, and the driver said, we can't go. The traffic's blocked, nobody's moving. So he got off the bus. He ran over to the Greyhound bus station, which was about 5 or 6 blocks away. And he caught a cab, a taxi cab, and he went to his one-room apartment on Beckley Street, where he did change clothes. He did not change his appearance. The clothes he had was virtually like the ones he'd taken off. The next thing we know, we had a witness who saw him out in Oak Cliff, probably a mile and a half from the one-room apartment on Beckley. They said he was acting suspicious at that time. He was walking along the sidewalk and he was looking right and left, and he just was really acting peculiar. And they saw J.D. Tippit in a one-man patrol car driving along the street. They saw Tippit stop the car and the glass was already down. He saw him talk to this guy across the seat of the car. The guy was on the... They talked for a couple of minutes. They didn't know what was said, and we don't know what was said. But Tippit set the emergency brake on the squad car. He got out of the squad car and walked around the front Now we have two solid witnesses who saw this. As he got to the front of the car, they saw this man raise the gun and fire it. Killed Tippit almost instantly. Now I talked with an auto dealer who owned a lot nearby. He said, I saw that shot and I saw him shoot this cop, he said. He said, and then he turned around and he kind of jogged down the street and he had that gun in half cock position. I said, what is half cock position? He said, he was holding it like this and kind of jogging along the street. He wasn't really running, but it was sort of jogging along. He went on, he made several turns and wound up on another street. Witnesses watched him as he come down those streets and went into the Texas Theater. There's some people in the balcony who, I don't know if they was watching the movie, but they were in the balcony. And but they did see a man come running in down the aisle. They could see over there as he run down and got over the middle part and sat down. And almost instantly, I mean, they said it was just a very short time. The lights came up on the theater. Officers came in those exit things and down the aisle too. They saw Nick McDonald as he approached this man sitting in the middle. The man stood up, drew a pistol out of his waistband. And as Nick McDonald approached him, he tried to shoot the gun. Now they could see the struggle over the gun. And Nick told me, he said, I saw that revolver and I just grabbed it like that. And he said the hammer fell and hit the web of my hand right here. And that's the only reason it didn't fire. And he held that thing locked in that grip. And this man, with one hand, turned around and hit Officer Paul Bentley, knocked him over some chairs and broke Bentley's leg. The struggle ended fairly quickly then, and they got him handcuffed and brought him in. That was Lee Oswald. The gun that he tried to kill Nick McDonald with, no question, but the gun that did kill Tippit. The investigation continued. By Saturday, we had received enough information that we felt like we had a case ready to file, and we filed formal charges with the district attorney for murder. We went back to the Payne residence and recovered the rest of the property there that belonged to Oswald. We took a search warrant, went out and recovered the rest of the property. We found in that property a photograph of interest. This was the photograph of the back of a house. It was a large, older home, and we could tell that it was probably in the Dallas area. And we were able to identify that house. It was the back of General Walker's house. And as we begin to continue that investigation, we found that the slug we had dug out of the wall was absolutely fired by that same rifle that we'd recovered off the 6th floor of the book depository. And in fact, Marina told us that Lee told her he tried to kill Walker. Now, I want to submit something to you. If the movie makes a great deal out of some massive conspiracy to kill President Kennedy, and that Oswald was just a patsy, and I wanted to ask you, why would he jump out of this conspiracy and make an attempt to kill Walker? Walker certainly wasn't anything like Kennedy. He was a radical, all right. He was a radical, super right-wing radical, but he was nothing like Kennedy at all. So Oswald tried to kill Walker, and you will not see any of these people that stress in these conspiracy theories that wants to talk about the attempted murder of General Walker. Secondly, they really don't want to admit that Oswald is the one that killed J.D. Tippit. He did, without question. We had half a dozen witnesses who positively identified him as the man who shot Tippit, without a doubt. And he was arrested shortly afterwards. So no question about whether he murdered Tippit or not. He did. One of the things of interest, that might interest you, we found that about 2 months before the assassination, there was a doctor and his son who had purchased some new hunting rifles in the Irving area. And they went to a public rifle range out there. They set up targets and they began to practice with theirs. The man came up on the next lane to them, and he began to fire at the target. He fired several times with this bolt-action rifle. He then packed up his gear and left. And they checked their target and checked his. He fired a near-perfect score on his own target. And that was Lee Oswald. Positively identified as Lee Oswald. He was out there practicing with the very gun that he killed the president with. No question about it. Another thing, Oswald never admitted any of these things. He did not admit shooting the president. He did not admit shooting Tippit. He did not admit shooting General Walker. He didn't admit any offense whatever. In fact, he said he never owned a rifle and didn't even know how to shoot one. That was his statement. He told me that. Now, on Saturday afternoon, we brought him back down out of jail for further interrogation, and Captain Fritz asked him, and I stood there in this interrogation. Captain Fritz asked him, he said, "You said that you'd never owned a rifle. Is that right?" And he said, "That's right. I never owned one. I never had a rifle in my life." Captain Fritz has laid that picture out in front of him. At that point, he got red in the face. He got very belligerent. He got very angry. He said, "Well, I don't know what that is. That someone has just superimposed my face on that body." That was his word. Captain Fritz said, "Well, it is your face. Is that correct?" And he said, "Well, on second thought, it's not even my face. It's just somebody that slightly resembles me." So that was his attitude in talking about any offense at all. He did love to talk about his life in Russia. He would talk it almost at length with you about things that went on in Russia, his life in Russia. Late Saturday afternoon, we had filed these formal charges. Now, in Texas, when you file formal charges, at that time we had a city jail active. Once a defendant was filed on formally, he was placed in custody of the sheriff, where he would either make bond or be held until trial. And the sheriff would make daily trips to the city jail in Dallas, where he would bring people who had been filed on to the county jail 20 blocks away. He usually used a paddy wagon. He'd chain them, about 15 or 20 of them up. He'd haul them down to jail. It was decided that this was such a media event, and by then we had media from all over the world. It was decided that it would be a good media event to transfer him to the custody of the sheriff publicly. Now, that was an idiotic decision. It was stupid. But it was decided by higher ups that it would be done with the chief of police and the city manager actually decided it. So late on Saturday night, Captain Fritz and I, and several of us, were present when he got into a heated argument with the city manager and the chief. Captain Fritz wanted to transfer him secretly at 4 a.m. when no one was around. They said, "We have already promised the media they could take pictures and make a media thing out of this, and we're going to do it. And we're going to move it at 9 a.m. Sunday morning. Had already got all that publicity, and we've set up security." And Captain Fritz wrote it down. And he let all of us were there, all the officers were there at that time. He let us go home and said several of them would be back and I could come in at noon that day. So the plan was made to move him. They were going to bring an armored car into the basement. Now, the City Hall in Dallas sits, Harwood Street runs north and south, Main Street runs east and west, Commerce Street runs east and west. The City Hall sits in that kind of configuration. There's the City Hall here, Main Street here, Harwood here, Commerce here. To enter the basement in a car, you drive off of Main Street, you turn right and drive down into the basement in the parking area. To leave, you drive up a ramp onto Commerce Street and turn left. It's one way. And so that was the way you'd enter off of Main, you'd exit onto Commerce. So they brought an armored car in at the time of the transfer, now. They intended to move him right on time. They got it stuck in the basement under some low pipes in there. And they had to get a wrecker to come get that thing out of the basement. And so it delayed the transfer about an hour. Now, in the meantime, about the time the transfer was announced to take place, Jack Ruby was in his apartment out in Oak Cliff. Jack Ruby was a homosexual type guy, and he lived out there with another homosexual in that apartment. He got a collect telephone call from an employee who needed some money to get out of jail. So he decided to get dressed and go to the Western Union office, which is in the same block that the City Hall's in. The City Hall is on the west end of the block, and the Western Union office is on the east end of the block. with some parking spaces in the middle. He parks his car, he goes over to the Western Union, he buys a money order and sends it to his employee who's in jail. The money order's time-stamped and sent. And about 5 minutes after that famous time-stamp, Jack Ruby walked into the basement and killed Oswald. Now, there's no way he could have known that the transfer was going to be delayed on account of that idiotic move about getting that car stopped down there. If he had known that he intended to kill Oswald, it had been down there at the time the transfer was supposed to take place. It was not unusual for him to carry a pistol. He had been arrested for carrying a gun before. He was an unsavory character, contrary to what you may hear. He wasn't liked. He owned a nightclub downtown Dallas. They called it a strip joint, where these striptease people work. And it was not a fancy club by any stretch. It was a dive, and nor was he well thought of by the majority of Dallas police officers, as you may have seen or heard. He was just an unsavory character, and he run this joint, and he lived with his partner. And so he wore that pistol, and he gave to get stopped and get put in jail for carrying that pistol. And he had it on that morning when he went to the Western Union office. He come out of there, he walked down the ramp. He told us, I was there when we talked to Ruby after the murder of Oswald. He told us that as he walked down that sidewalk, he saw that big, tall cop, he called him. That guy was Roy Long. He's about 6'4", a uniformed officer at the time, who was standing there guarding that down ramp that comes off of Main Street. He said, I saw that tall cop step out in the street and stop traffic like this on Main Street. He said, I looked down that ramp and I saw all them people, and there's lights flashing and everything, so I walked down that ramp. And he said, when I got to the bottom of the ramp, I saw Captain Fritz and them detectives leading that guy that killed my president out of that door, and I just grabbed my gun and shot him. That's what he said. Millions of people saw him. Wasn't even question whether he did it or not, but he did shoot him. Shot him one time right here on the left side, right there. And Oswald screamed out a loud curse word and fell to the sidewalk, went unconscious, and died. And he never at any time during any of the sessions did he admit shooting Tippit or President Kennedy. Oswald was a loner type person. Our investigation showed that he had no real friends at all. He was really sort of an untrustworthy kind of guy. He was not trustworthy. And he wasn't the kind of guy that any one of you would hire to do a job or trust to do very much of a job at all. Contrary to what the movie says, Oswald was an accident. He was an idiot. He was an absolute idiot. He was on about the same order that Hinckley. You remember this guy tried to kill President Reagan. Oswald was kind of on that order. But he was so political, radical, wild, people just wouldn't have anything to do with him. Nobody liked him. Even Marina said that he was so wild and radical. She didn't like him either. But, so, Oswald, about 3 weeks before that November date, Oswald had attended a meeting in Dallas a group of ACLU people. He got so wild and radical that they bodily threw him out of the meeting. He disrupted that meeting. And that's the truth. If you're too wild for them, you're pretty wild. Ruth Payne lived in Irving on 6th Street. She was on 5th Street. She was attending a university in Dallas, taking some Russian language courses. She and her husband, Michael Payne, were separated. He lived in Grand Prairie, another city adjoining. At the time, while I was in the house on 6th Street, we had just finished conducting a fairly quick search of that residence. We were in the back room, and as I had said, our car was actually on the side. All of a sudden, the front door opened, and the guy stepped in. And I looked around the corner, and I saw him as he stepped in. I didn't know who he was, but he was walking pretty fast. He said, well, just as soon as I heard where that thing happened up there, I come over to see if y'all was going to need some help. And then he saw me and he stopped talking. That was Michael Payne. He worked for Bell Helicopter. He was some sort of a supervisor or something for them. He lived alone in Grand Prairie. He was a real weirdo too. We confiscated some film out of that house that belonged to him, and it was really weird. won't try to describe it, but he wanted it back. I don't know if he ever got it or not. So as we continued this thing, we tried Jack Ruby. Now Jack Ruby, he wanted people to believe that he was a little mafia guy. And the mafia wouldn't have nothing to do with Jack Ruby. He was an unsavory little guy. They wouldn't want him. And he didn't have anything. I searched his apartment after he killed Oswald that morning. I went out with a warrant and thoroughly searched his apartment. He didn't have anything. He was just barely getting by. But he wanted people to believe that he was an important mafia type guy. He would brag it. But the Dallas Police Department Intelligence Unit never, ever developed one shred of anything that showed that Jack Ruby had any kind of dealings with the mafia. He was just a little homosexual guy who tried to run his business and act important, and that was it. We tried Jack Ruby. I testified at the trial. It lasted 30 days. We convicted him. Before the sentence could be carried out, the case was reversed, or a new trial was ordered, and before he could be tried, he died of cancer. Some of the media said we gave it to him. About November the 25th, I'd have been glad to give it to him if I could, but before we was getting hecked and out. Jack Ruby died without ever telling me more than that. He lived up there. A 24-hour guard was placed on him in the county jail. It was believed that he was suicidal, and they wanted to watch him, and he was never out of anyone's sight for 24 hours a day until he died. All the investigation that we did, we continued our part of it. The FBI helped us, and the Secret Service worked on it too. And we never were able to uncover any kind of connection, none whatever, between Jack Ruby and Lee Oswald, or between Lee Oswald and later Clay Shaw, when Garrison, District Attorney in New Orleans, decided to make a lot of headlines by trying Clay Shaw for conspiracy. Now, Garrison wanted that thing all wrong. If he was going to prove conspiracy to kill the president, he hit a dead end by going through this community in New Orleans, this homosexual community down there, when he tried to bring it out through Jack Ruby. That was just a dead end. Jack Ruby was nothing. If he wanted some sort of conspiracy, he would have had to throw it another way. The movie, I saw the movie today, and really it infuriated me to this way. Is that director attacks our government. He says there was a conspiracy between the FBI, the Dallas Police, the Secret Service, President Johnson. We all conspired to kill President Kennedy. And it's an absolute false thing. Most of the things in the movie, and there's two accurate things in the movie. He's got the accurate date that it happened and the accurate victim. Above that, most of it is not accurate. Most of it is false. He has false people in there who do not exist to tell things, and then he builds something on this false thing that these false people tell. For example, some guy in there introduces himself to Jim Garrison as Mr. X. Now, Mr. X gives him all kind of good evidence. To this day, nobody knows who Mr. X is because he kind of went off into the darkness after he told all this. And so Garrison built his whole case around this Mr. X, telling him that this whole deal was designed by Lyndon Johnson to enhance the Vietnam War. So he has to bring that into it. He says that was the whole thing. And I'd like to ask just one question. If 2 days after Hinckley shot Reagan, if he had been killed in police custody, do you think there had been all kinds of conspiracy theories? Or 2 days after Sirhan killed Bobby Kennedy, he had been killed in police custody, don't you think there had been a million conspiracy theories? Or Lynette Fromm, who tried to kill President Ford, 2 days later she was killed. Or the guy who shot and killed Martin Luther King, what if he was killed in police custody 2 days later? There have been massive conspiracy theories. As there is, you don't see any. And you wouldn't have here if we had tried Oswald, because everybody would have been satisfied with the outcome of it. And so I'm convinced that yes, the Dallas police did an absolute stupid thing by transferring Oswald and letting him get killed. You just think you got problems when your president gets killed in your city. Wait till you get his assassin killed in your basement. Yeah, it's pretty serious. So, any questions? I'll be glad to take some questions.
Gus, what did the officer Baker say to you about Oswald's demeanor as he came down the steps to the 6th floor?
Baker said that Oswald was excited. He said the guy, when I interviewed him, we didn't know Oswald at the time, but he said the guy that come down those stairs was excited. And he apparently been running. He seemed out of breath. He said, I didn't really think much about it. Everybody in the building had been running. He said, but I just stopped him because he's the first one I saw. And I said, hold up, I want to talk to him. And he said, the guy stopped. And he said, this building manager said, oh, he's okay, he works here. And so he went on upstairs.
He didn't have a pistol in.
No, I think that we don't know when he got the pistol, except I really believe he got it when he went home to Oak Cliff, to his little apartment in Oak Cliff. We don't believe he had it on him then.
What kind of cancer did Ruby die of?
I really don't have some sort of internal thing. If we'd have had AIDS back then, I'd say it'd be AIDS. But it's internal cancer.
Do you think if Oswald was brought to trial, you have obviously seen most of the evidence that the state compiled. Do you think that Oswald would have been convicted?
Yes,
Had he gone?
without a doubt. We'd have had witnesses who testified that they actually saw him in the 6th floor window fire at least 2 shots, the last 2 shots. There was a sliver of lead that was recovered out of the president's skull at autopsy. There was enough rifling there that the examiner could say that it came out of that rifle, ballistically. There's no question, and I think evidence would have shown positively that Oswald shot the president. There could have been questions. I've worked about 1,000 homicides, and in every one, there's always questions raised. The worst one I worked where 5 police officers were abducted by 2 gunmen, taken off into the river bottom, and 3 of them were murdered. The 4th one, he survived. He was shot critically wounded. 5th one escaped. And in that even, with trained police officers, we had so many things coming out of that case. We did try it, and we convicted them. The evidence was held up and everything was all right. But in every case, you can always go back and ask foolish questions. Garrison, let me show you. One of these, Garrison come up with the idea, and this guy in New York, he comes up with the idea that there was a gunman in a sort of a drainage sewer, hiding down in there, and he raised up out of there and fired his rifle and shot the president. Now, Garrison said that. And we located the sewer. It has a little 12-inch cover on it, like this. I couldn't even get my foot down in there, but so when they brought that to Garrison's attention, he said, well, there's a lot of crazy people in Texas, and some of them are little. He wouldn't admit his theory was wrong.
They had a theory that the shots came from the railroad yard.
Yes, sir.
Behind the fence there, and they I did not read the Warren Commission report. They also talked about some witnesses who had stated that there were more than 3 shots fired. And I'm coming on that.
Yes, sir. For the first few weeks of that investigation, we didn't find anybody that said they heard a massive amount of shots. We did find some who couldn't tell exactly where they came from. Those buildings apparently called echoes. We had some officers, some police officers, who said that definitely no shots came from that grassy knoll. Definitely did not. They were there, they were stationed so they could see it. So, yeah, since the thing, 2 or 3 weeks later, after a lot of publicity, we started having people who saw things that maybe it wasn't really there. I don't mean they were bad, I just mean a lot of people may have thought they saw something they didn't see. I don't know, somebody come up with a picture, a photograph, and they said if you look hard enough, you can see a face in that hedge. It's like those faces you see in clouds and stuff. I couldn't see it.
Gus, did you ever talk to the 3 school book depository workers that were on the 5th floor directly under Oswald?
I didn't personally talk to them. I'm familiar with them, but I didn't personally. Most of what I've told you tonight is something I had personal knowledge of. Most of everything I've told you.
Did the officers or the agents who did talk to them, did they feel they were reliable, pretty reliable witnesses?
Our officers did feel it. I don't know. I didn't talk with the agents, system agents talked to them. Our officers felt like that they were all right. They didn't feel like they were wrong. Captain Fritz met with all of us. There was 24 detectives. We had numerous meetings on homicide with Captain Fritz after that, as our investigation progressed. And by the time the Warren Commission testimony was due, we met. Captain Fritz was positively convinced that we had the right kind of case on Oswald. None of this, most of this conspiracy stuff was just someone trying to tell us. Oswald wanted to make a telephone call on Saturday out of the jail. He was placed on the phone and he called an attorney, a guy named Mark Lane. And Mark Lane was defending some communist causes at the time. Mark Lane is the first one that came out publicly saying Oswald just didn't do it. We had the wrong guy altogether. And just somebody on a grassy knoll did it. I heard him when he said it. I saw him interview him. But if I was defending Oswald, I'd probably say that too. But
Oswald made a phone call or Ruby?
Oswald
called him.
he called him himself. We put him on the phone and called him out of that jail.
One of the sort of enduring questions, as I understand it, had to do with the fact that in shooting the bolt-action rifle, correct me if I'm wrong, but allegedly the shots were fired very quickly, within 3 to 6 seconds or something like that. And there was some question as to whether or not even a marksman like Oswald could actually do the action and get off the shots as accurately as he did. What are your feelings on that?
Okay. The way we determined the time on those shots was through the Bruder film. And we were able to, you can't be very accurate, but we're fairly certain that the 3 were over in 7 to 10 seconds. Let me show you something. You don't start the time clock till the first shot. If you knew when it was going to happen, you could, but you don't. You hear the shots, so you start your time clock. And in 7 to 10 seconds, you fire 2 more shots. Now, that's no major feat. That really, I'm not a good shot. I just barely get high on the range, but I can do that, and I believe most of us could.
Even with the bolt action?
2 shots. All you got to do is 2.
Did your department get a copy?
Go ahead, Pete.
Should I pass to her? Did your department get a copy of the autopsy report, the photographs of the autopsy? Did you ever receive that, or the case just sort of died when the defendant?
No, a copy came to the department, to the homicide unit, of the autopsy report. It wasn't the same kind of report we would have gotten if it had done. Now in Texas, in Dallas at that time, we did not have what was called a medical examiner system. We used a justice of the peace to act as coroner, and we had a medical examiner who was hired, but the justice of the peace actually acted as coroner. The medical examiner in this case would have been a well-known pathologist named Dr. Earl Rose, no relation. But the justice of the peace did order an autopsy in that case, and the officers they did attempt to remove Kennedy's body from trauma room 1 and take him to the morgue, and the Secret Service wouldn't let them have him. But everybody was distraught. That Secret Service was terribly distraught. They felt awful that he was killed in a very, young. And none of us were really upset it did violate state law by removing that body without the autopsy. It did do that. And I cannot explain it.
Can you mention those things you and I talked about today?
Sure.
The fact that how we got involved, did you tell them what they did?
Well, when they tried to remove that body, Secret Service had already had a casket brought in there. They did draw their weapons and remove him at gunpoint. I talked with some of the officers who were there. They did not offer any. They didn't want to get involved in some kind of shooting, and I don't know if there's been one or not. But they certainly did draw their weapons.
But did you you didn't get the type report you would have gotten from Dr. Rose, did you?
We got a report. It wasn't the same kind we would have gotten from Dr. Rose.
So you got a report from whoever finally did the autopsy?
Yes.
Which was not the, okay.
No, it came from Maryland.
I mean, his head was blown off in the street, whatever. I mean, that's, you know.
An autopsy, of course, an autopsy gives you a complete report of the physical condition of the person.
Yeah.
We got a report. We did not get a complete physical report.
What is your option special, and how long left Dallas in one form, like with a sheet, and the next form was in a Bible? I mean, that's just trying to prove conspiracy.
I think it is. Personally, I don't think that he changed forms from the time he got put on that plane to the time he got there. I think that's somebody trying to build their conspiracy. If you wanted to write a book, you'd have to be controversial or it wouldn't sell. There was an author who wrote a book in England, and he said that Lee Oswald was in his grave. And he got so much publicity and attention that a judge in Dallas ordered the body exhumed out of that grave, and they did exhume that body, and I'm pleased to report that Oswald is still in his grave.
Have you ever questioned by these people that made the movie and the book?
Yeah.
Who portrayed you in the movie, or were you in it?
I don't guess I was in there. I just one with a big old white hat on.
Did they ever perform a gunpowder test from Oswald?
They make a deal in the movie. They say no nitrite test was conducted. Well, back in 1963, we did not, in Dallas, and I don't know about the rest of this country, we did not conduct nitrite tests like hand washing. You do hand washing now to do it. We did paraffin tests on him.
Right.
There was a paraffin test.
Oh, his cheeks as well as his hair?
I don't recall on his cheek. Lieutenant Day supervised that, and I don't remember how extensive that was.
Well, that would be the only place I think that the actual bolt-action rifle would leave gunpowder, because he'd already shot a handgun, y'all knew that.
Yeah, wasn't no question.
That's right.
One of the things, I saw a movie last weekend, the one thing that shocked me, I'm an attorney, about 20 years ago, I had one of my first Bronx liability cases, and what it was, this man had gone to Kmart or one of those stores and bought a Italian rifle, and he also bought some shells with it, and guess what, it blew up in his face, and damaged his eye, and I took it to a gun expert in this theater on the south side, and the man made rifles. He looked at that because it was a piece of junk.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I saw the movie that suddenly dawned on me it was the same type of rifle. And if it was going to be a professional assassin, you couldn't use that piece of junk.
Right.
I mean, it was brought over. He said they ought to put the guy in jail that shipped this stuff in. It was shipped over as junk, as scrap metal. They have a license of scrap metal, and then this outfit up in New York, what they did, they took the bolts out. And then they had the bolts all in one bag, and then the box, and then they had all the rifle in another one. And that way it wasn't a rifle, it was just scrap metal. Then they put them back together, and then they pawned them off to Kmart or something. They sterilized it, and they took the bayonet that was built into the rifle off of it. And then they retooled the ammunition. And what happened when they retooled it, they just they pulled out the projectile. And then they hammered the shoulder down, and doing so they altered the shoulder, the head of the rifle, the shoulder of it. And when that bullet expanded, it just shattered and took my client's eye out.
This was
a
probably
piece of machine.
Now, this was a piece of junk. He ordered it from a mail order house out of Chicago. I have a copy of the deal at home. Seemed like he paid about $12.50 or $13.
Yeah.
But it was a little better than that. I mean, it was fired. It was test fired later. It was a piece of junk. It was cheap. But now about Oswald, he was in the Marine Corps. He was incorrigible. He could not be supervised. But there was one thing he did do right, and he was very proud of in there. He fired expert on rifle range. In fact, he had his sharpshooter's medal. I found it in Irving in that sea bag along with his certificate for it. And he was so proud of his sharpshooter's medal that he fired expert. Now, as to whether he could fire those, I believe most of us here with a little practice could do about the same thing. The movie makes a big deal of why didn't he shoot him while he's on Houston Street. Well, I don't know what's in the mind of some idiot that wants to kill the president. He may not be as rational as Harrison.
Did you test fire it? It was accurate enough to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, it was.
He was probably going, should I do it, should I not, like that. Until
I think he was-
finally, the last second, he had to do
I
it.
think he was terribly nervous. He had made a shot at General Walker and missed. And I think he wasn't sure he was going to come out on this. But he had tried to kill Walker earlier.
Would the witnesses that saw him in the window, in that grass area across from the book depository, that little park-like area?
And that, right across from there.
Yeah.
Two of them that I talked to said they looked up and they could see that face in the window.
That's a long way
It's
to
one guy.
identify somebody.
It's about 80 yards, but at a distance, you're looking up, it really wouldn't be that far if you just look straight.
And he's kind of a Ichabod Crane looking fellow anyway.
They positively picked him out.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no question about it. So I don't know, I really don't have any problem with it.
Gus, you said something about, I guess, if I was defending Oswald, that's what I just said too. Being what you know about the case though, how would you possibly defend this thing other than saying he's crazy?
Oh, yeah, well, I'd have defended, I'd have said they got the wrong guy.
No, but I mean, really, from I mean, you got eyewitnesses, you got firearms identifications.
Well, they do it all the time,
You don't have to tell me.
Personally, you're right, you'd have to come back and say the same. I'm convinced that they'd been better off with Jack Ruby to just jump up there and plead guilty and say the same. So, but this guy comes in from California. I was in the courtroom when he came in. He came in wearing he had a purple cape. He comes into the courtroom, he kind of swung it like that and it swirled around. We all said that Bill Alexander, one of the lead prosecutors, sat there and big shoe back in his and he just couldn't believe it. He said Marvin Bell, I was a defense lawyer, and he said Bill Alexander was a little uncouth, and he says, you like to miss the rack there, Mr. Belly. So I said, don't call me Belly anymore. Oh, yeah. The movie makes a big issue saying that during these interrogation sessions, nobody took notes or tape recording. Let me tell you something. I've been active in interrogation for years, and I teach it. I occasionally call on to go to cities around Dallas and interrogate criminal suspects. Let me tell you, if you bring a criminal suspect into the room and you tell him that you're going to tape record what he tells you, I promise you that you will not be successful in breaking him in your interrogation. You will not. Maybe one time out of 10,000 he won't talk. But secondly, I don't think it would be legal to tape record him and not let him know it's being tape recorded. But say it was, and you wanted to tape record this interrogation. If you were aware that everything you said was being tape recorded, you probably wouldn't be a very effective interrogator. You have to establish a rapport with this guy, and you may not say anything about this case that you're going to talk about that you care for people knowing, but there's other things you may talk about that you just assume you do. And so you'd be too careful with what you say. Secondly, if you bring a suspect in to talk to him and you begin to write down notes as you ask him questions, he's going to be so careful at the way he answers your questions that he's not going to break and confess to some crime to you. He's not going to confess some horrible crime that'll send him to penitentiary forever. As long as he sees you sitting there writing. Now, there's a time you can write it. I've interrogated hundreds of people and taken lots of statements. Once you break this guy and get him to tell you whatever you're after, then you can reduce it to writing. But the movie makes this big deal about that. If any one of you have ever been in a situation where you were on a crime scene and had a reporter come up and start asking you questions with a microphone, I promise you, you're super careful at how you better. Careful at how you answer. You're not about to say things that's going to somehow or other incriminate you. So no, it's no big deal. Back then, we never taped those interrogation sessions. Or as I know, the Dallas Police Department still doesn't tape interrogation sessions. And I teach you should not have writing material visible when you bring a suspect into the room. If you've got a confession form laying here, you bring him in and set him down, and he's looking at that, you're making the wrong statement to him. And so I teach you just don't have any of that. You just have a blank desk here, and you bring him in and set him down. So no, that movie makes a big deal about it.
Did you interview Robert Oswald?
I didn't do a good interview. I did talk to him for a little while one night in the homicide office. Robert seemed like a sensible guy. And, probably a victim, just, I don't think he knew anything. And he told me that Lee was a real nut. The family was scared of him. And they tried to stay away from him a lot.
Did anyone you ever interviewed around Oswald's life and past ever say that he threatened the life of the president?
No. I never had anyone that said he threatened the president. That he said anything bad about the president at all. I never found one that I talked to. I've read stacks of reports that other officers interviewed, and we just didn't find people that said he actually threatened the president.
Was there any indication from Marina that Oswald had hinted to her that he tried to kill Walter?
Yes. Marina did tell us that. She said that he had mentioned in some talk that he had got some news publicity about the Walker's attempted death, and Oswald made some statement to the public. He realized he tried to kill him.
She didn't tell Ruth Payne anything about that, did she?
She said she didn't, and Ruth Payne said she didn't. I didn't totally trust Ruth Payne. She was sort of she was really strange, but I don't know. She said she didn't, and Ruth Payne said she didn't.
What did you find out about how Oswald was hired at the bottom?
Ruth Payne helped get him the job. She saw an ad for that job, she said, and she helped get him the job. He was looking for a job, really. He was so lazy. I don't mean lazy, he was such, but he wouldn't support his family. Ruth Payne said that Marina and the two children were virtually starving when she brought them in.
Didn't the Russian interview say that he was lazy even over there?
Yeah. He was, all he wanted to talk about was some real radical political stuff. That's all. I found a letter in his property that came from a guy in Minsk, Russia. This guy said, you said that you were thinking about coming back to Russia. And my advice is don't do it. You know you're not welcome here. That's a strange statement, but that's what he said.
White Russian.
Oh, yeah. I want to find it. I've been in there at Dallas Police, worked 37 years. I haven't found our white Russian community. That movie said that.
Extensive.
Yeah, the extensive white Russian community. Well, we don't have it. If we got one, I did 37 years worth of work, and it's been a secret. I don't know what it is.
Conspiracy aside and all this other, is it basically believed that Oswald just did this as it sounds like a fun kind of thing to do today?
You know what I think? I think he's such a radical guy. Something about him needed to kill some important person to make himself important. If he could have killed Walker when he tried, it probably may never have come to the murder of the president. I don't know. I think he just had to shoot some important person to prove himself a little bit important. He was a typical political assassin. Let me show you. When Hinckley shot President Reagan, he didn't have an escape route planned. When Lynette Braun tried to kill Ford, she didn't have an escape plan. When Sirhan killed Bobby Kennedy, he didn't have an escape plan. I've talked to those psychiatrists that do those profiles, and they say that this type of political assassin is so intent on what he was doing that he didn't plan an escape. Now, witnesses tell us that Oswald came out of the book depository in a sort of confused state. He was acting nervous and upset and got on a city bus. Now, not one of you here would plan to do a major crime. Ride away on a city bus.
Y'all might
Gus, one theory that's semi-credible is that Oswald was trying to shoot Governor Connally. In your interviews, did you ever get a feel for the fact that you might have missed with the law person?
None of us that really did those interviews ever felt like he was trying to get Connally. We really felt like he only wanted Kennedy, and I think that was Connally getting shot. I don't think he intended any harm to Connally. I know they wanted to say that because he was Secretary of Navy, but I don't think that he meant it. None of the officers I've talked with, not all of the homicide people, none of them had the feeling that he was trying to get Connally. Not one.
Has Governor Connally, as the years have gone by, has he changed any of his thoughts about the three-shot theory, the single bullet theory?
I've seen interviews with him. I hadn't personally interviewed him, but I've seen where he's come up with 2 or 3 different things he said that was in conflict with each other. So I suppose there's a lot of confusion. I know there is. A guy that gets shot and nearly dies, there's a lot of confusion about what really happened to him. And yeah, he's changed a little bit. Even Marina has changed hers recently. So you're going to have to pretty well go with what is said within a few hours of the thing. I think you come on here getting the truth immediately after it happened, and days or weeks later. So right after that, we were convinced that Oswald was dead at that moment. And that's not one thing has ever turned up solid to show any conspiracy. But I can tell you one thing for absolutely 100% sure. Our government didn't kill President Kennedy. The FBI and the Secret Service and the Dallas Police and Lyndon Johnson didn't have a thing to do with it.
Has there ever been an official police psychological profiling?
I haven't seen a police one. I have seen psychological profiles, but not a Dallas police.
Yeah, it's a shame. Now we don't really know what
Yeah,
was going through his head.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
Gus, your opinion, your thoughts on what do you think is locked up and we won't find out for another 30-some-odd years?
I don't think you're going to find anything that indicates a conspiracy. I do think that there probably was some things about President Kennedy that they didn't want us to know. And it may have been something to do with his physical condition, for one thing. I know he'd had some physical problems, and I don't want to really speculate, but I feel like he had some things about him that they didn't want the American people to know he has. I don't know what it would be, but something. I do believe that, because otherwise there'd be no point in stealing it. I want to find him. I mean, we all know he died from a massive gunshot. So whatever else they found, they still did. I think that's what.
How much of the evidence is still with the Dallas PD? You know, is there a room there now with some evidence?
No, we turned over all that we had to the FBI. And we did photograph it. We photographed every bit of it before we did it. We turned it over. With the exception of a couple of things that we still have. We have a map, a city map of Dallas there that we've got in Dallas. On that map, it shows 2 parade routes marked out in pen. It was the same route that you read a newspaper, you'd see the first one, and you see the second one. Oswald had drawn those out on his map. On the first one, it showed an X, little X marked up there, and we were able to locate that place on the map in the city up there. It was a little two-story flat top building. And went up on the building. Someone had been prowling around up on top of the building on it. I'm convinced it was Oswald. I don't want to be a lot of speculation with this exception. Oswald had the map and had an X marked at that location, and someone had been on the building. I'm convinced if the parade had come down Mockingbird Street, Oswald still would have shot the president. He would have done it from the top of that building.
How long has he been working at the police department?
He hadn't been there very long. He, just a few months.
He was already working there before Kennedy.
Before he even planned his trip to Texas, he was working there. Ruth Fain helped him get the job. He was working just as menial labor. He wasn't.
And the first, the X place before he was.
It was the first parade route that was listed on in the paper.
Did you mention about the change of roads?
Now, it was changed. The Democratic Party really wanted to change because they wanted to give him more visibility. And they changed it and moved it downtown, where it come down Main Street. Now, we found that map. It was marked on there. Is that what you're talking about? Where the two routes, it was the same map. It was one route, Mockingbird, Main Street. I'm convinced he shot him regardless of which way he took. It just happened to come by the book depository, and that made it more convenient for him.
Do you know if there have been any attempts by journalists or by others to get the autopsy reports using, say, for example, the Freedom of Information Act?
Just what I've read in the papers. I've read where they tried to get it.
And no one's been able to get it.
I just read that, so I don't know the legal part of it, but they haven't got it. There's a guy in Dallas named Hugh Ainsworth. I talked to Hugh yesterday. There's an article that appeared in yesterday's morning news in the editorial section, and it's called Journalist View of JFK. It's an interesting thing here. I know Hugh Ainsworth. I've known him for years. At the time of the assassination of the president, Hugh had been working for U.S. News magazine. He'd also been with the Washington paper. Hugh Ainsworth is absolutely convinced. He's written several articles, and he's absolutely convinced that Oswald acted alone, that there was no conspiracy. There are other journalists that I know who are also investigative journalists who agree 100% with Hugh. At one point, Mr. Ainsworth recalls Mr. Garrison insisted that a shot had been fired at the president from a cistern. Well, that's the same thing we had found out near the triple underpass. He then comes back and says, well, there's just little bitty people that shot that 12-inch pipe. Let's see, I was going to read you one more thing that he talks about. So what viewers are really paying to see is not so much a movie about John Kennedy as a movie about Jim Garrison. And that's what you're going to see if you see the movie. You'll see a movie about Jim Garrison, and you'll hear a lot of verbiage about the Vietnam War. And,
What's Jim Garrison doing now?
I really don't know what he's doing.
Judge.
He had been a judge, but I don't know if he still is.
He still is.
Is he?
What's Marina doing?
Marina lives in the city of Greenville, which is about 60 miles east of Dallas. She's still married to the man she married a couple of years after the assassination, a guy named Porter. And her two children have grown now. I haven't got to see them. I hear that we've come close to time to. They've made a few talks. I understand that they're good Christian ladies and that they're well respected and well thought of. Her two children are. And they grew up, both of them now. One of them's married, the other's about to be married. But Marina still lives in the area. She lives 60 miles east of Dallas. With this guy named Porter. She's married to him.
You can tell I have a thought, right? I saw Oswald's daughter interviewed, did y'all see that?
I didn't see that.
She was not told all her life she was an Oswald. She thought she was a Porter, and somehow she read across something in the attic with Oswald on it, and they had to explain to her we couldn't marry each other.
They were just little bitty children when we brought them out from Irving in the car, in our car, in my city car. And One of them just a baby, the other was just like maybe 3 years old. Just over two.
Is Ruth Page still now?
I've lost total track of her. She was there for years after this happened, but right now I don't have any idea. Rick?
Gus, thank you.
I want to thank everyone for attending and supporting Rick in his efforts this week. I know for a fact that he worked very hard in bringing us all together. The money raised tonight is going to support our chaplaincy program, and it's appreciated from the bottom of our heart. I don't know about you, but I could probably hear this guy just go through this over and over again, because I'm not one that has really gotten into conspiracy theory that much. It's intriguing, and the movie is a little entertaining, but then yet again, it's like Gus and I discussed a little earlier. They're throwing a smorgasbord out for you there. I honestly believe that if Oliver Stone could have had Mickey Mouse in the conspiracy theories, somehow he would have put a suit on him and done it. And yeah, but that's right. I've never worked homicide, so I thank all of you for coming, and we're looking forward for a great day tomorrow at our church, Ridgecrest, and if you'd like to hear him again, we've got tickets for sale at the door, I guess, but we'll be getting started at 7 in the morning with a breakfast, and I imagine Gus and Jerry would like to probably retire for the night, get you a good night's sleep, because I know they've gotten up early this morning for a long flight. And if you'll stand and we'll close with a word of prayer, and again, I want to thank everyone. Okay. Before I do close with a word of prayer, I'd like to bring something to everyone's attention. And I'm just going to say this because, number one, in my relationship with my God, I believe in the power of prayer. And I say this because Gus and Jerry have they've had a weight kind of placed on them in the past several months. And if any of you have a personal relationship with God, then uplift this prayer to Him in your quiet time, in your time of prayer at church tomorrow maybe. And that is for Gus and Jerry's granddaughter, Lynette. Approximately 4 months ago, she was found in a diabetic coma, almost full term with a baby. They were able to take the baby, and to this day, she's still in a coma. And 21-year-old granddaughter of Gus and Jerry's. And my heart, and the heart of Rick's, and a lot of people at our church have been going out to them. So remember Gus and Jerry in this, and just uplift them to the Lord in prayer, and pray that God will simply bring Lynette out of that coma, and that He will be able to use her in a positive witnessing capacity for the rest of her life over this experience that she's had to go through. And y'all just remember her. Bow with me, please. Dear Father, we're just thankful again, Father, for Jerry and Gus, Father, to be with us tonight. Father, we've heard from the outset of tonight's speaking engagement, Father, that Gus, from a young boy, from a young man, has given his life to you. Father, we know that in order to do that, He accepted your Son, Jesus Christ, as His Lord and Savior. Father, and it's just a living example that He and Jerry have instilled in their family, Father, that should be a shining example to all of us, Father, that they know who their Lord and Savior is, Father. Father, we thank you for this wonderful evening, Father, and we just thank you for the experience to be able to relive firsthand some intriguing and important American history from the very first-hand experience. Father, we uplift Gus and Jerry to you, Father. We just pray that you'll be with them this weekend and let them feel what we have in our hearts for them. Father, we pray for Lynette. Father, we just simply pray that you will bring this young woman out of the coma. Father, just restore her to her family that are waiting with open arms and anxious hearts. Father, we only know that whatever outcome will happen, it'll be through your mercy, Father, for you are the great physician and healer. Father, thank you again, and bless us as we leave this place. Return us safely tomorrow to our own church, that we may worship you. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.